Hello, good morning, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well today. My name is Derek Eady, Economic Development Specialist with the United States Small Business Administration, and welcome to this U.S. Small Business Administration webinar. Thank you all for joining us today as we discuss RFIs, RFQs, and RFPs, understanding the difference. And, when in the promotional emails that was sent out, I sort of manipulated or changed the subject. When I initially put together the webinar, it was RFIs, RFQs, and RFPs, understanding the difference. And I'd gotten that title from my guest previous PowerPoint presentation. But for the purposes of marketing, I decided to add in effective strategies for creating effective responses to sort of, I guess, jazz it up of a sense. So we're going to merge the two. I said all that to say that we'll merge the two and just say RFIs, RFQs, and RFPs, understanding the difference for effective strategies for creating effective responses. So how about that? We'll just merge the two, best of both worlds in that. But thank you all again for joining us today. Now, the key takeaways for today's webinar: understanding the power of responding to RFIs and sources sought notice, tips on creating effective responses, insights from Federal Contracting Officer Jessica Pate, and common mistakes to avoid. And again, Jessica Pate, branch manager with GSA in Alabama. She'll be joining us in just a few moments. Actually, Jessica is already online. I'm just going to bring her up in a couple of moments after some quick announcements. Now, if you want to stay up to date and informed on these type of webinars, please send me your email. You send me the email at Derek, DEREK, .edy, EADY, at sba.gov, and I'll put that in the Q&A. But send me your email address. Let me know that you want to stay up to date on our webinars, and we'll get you added and included in our email list, because I want to make sure that you all are abreast of not just our webinars, but also public releases, press releases for the public from SBA, our district office in Jackson, as well as national press releases. And also, I solicit any of your ideas for webinars or topics, business topics that you want to cover or that you'd like for us to cover. Whatever topics that are impacting you and you want to know more about, just send me an email at any time, and I'll work to put that webinar together and arrange that webinar. Now, speaking of, I want to quickly turn your attention to an upcoming event next week, actually, next Tuesday, that we are having. This will be available, our Empower to Grow workshop. This will be available if you are, afar or if you're near. Either way, you can view it online. You'll have to go and register online. Also, if you want to come and see it in person or be here in person, just send me an email at derek.edy@sba. Let me know that you would like to, watch the webinar in person. We'll be here in Biloxi. Just send me your email address. I'll send you the locations of where we'll be watching the webinar. So this is SBA's Empower to Grow. It's Government Contracting 101, as you can see on the screen. Now, those that may be listening and driving or what have you, I'll read this out. But those who are watching via their monitors, they can see on the screen SBA Empower to Grow, Government Contracting 101. It's formerly known as 7J, but Empower to Grow offers business courses, personalized training, and consulting to help eligible disadvantaged small businesses grow. Now, who can participate? 8A certified participants, HubZone certified small businesses, those that have economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses, or have a small business located in areas of high unemployment or low income, have a business owned by low income individuals. Now, let me say this. That's to go for, that's to uh, guarantee entry into the Empower to Grow program. You don't have to have those things to be a part of what we are offering next Tuesday. You can come and just learn more about the program or watch more about the program the same way you're watching right now, today's webinar. What you'll learn: basics on finding and bidding on government contracts, strategic and operating planning, marketing and business development, tools and resources to grow your business. And here's the thing, again, in-person attendance, you send me an email and let me know, we'll get you a seat reserved. If you want to attend virtual, here is the address to register. You have to register. If you want this flyer, if you want this information flyer sent to you and you want this address to register sent to you, send me your email address, derek.edie@sba.gov. Send me your email address and I'll get this flyer sent to you and you can register. Once I send it to you, if you want to send it to any other, person, some other small business firms, small business owners, you are more than welcome. Please. So help me spread the word. This was some great information. When I found out about this program, I contacted the company that is doing the instructing, doing the teaching on this, and I was like, we gotta bring this here. And so I'm proud to be able to work with Bid Speed to offer this to all of you. So please, whether you want to watch in person or you want to join via Zoom, avail yourselves of this and be a part of it, because it's really great information, and I'm all about helping people develop their business and grow. And so this is one of the reasons why I wanted to offer this, as well as why I work to do these webinars every Tuesday. Okay, so any information on this, just send me an email. Now we've got to go to our guests now because I've eaten up a lot of time. But I just had to let you all know this information here. So let me stop sharing my screen and let me reshare. Okay, and in the meantime, let me bring up our guest today. Jessica, how are you doing? Okay, you're off mute now. Jessica, how are you doing?
Hey, Derek, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, getting the opportunity to talk to people like you and share information to help small business firms grow and develop, be it business-wise. And so I am doing awesome, as they say, better than I deserve. But thank you, Jessica, for joining us today. Just so that people can know a little bit about you, how long have you been with GSA and in your current position?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Derek. And it's a pleasure to be here. So I have been with GSA since 2018, but I have been doing federal contracting work for over 10 years. And so I have federal contracting experience for civilian agencies, and those would include like the Department of Veterans Affairs. I have some corporate private experience as well as some DoD experience. And so that would include the Department of the Department of the Army and the Defense Logistics Agency, so DLA. And I've been a branch chief with GSA's Direct Client Support Division for the past 3 years.
Absolutely. I always wonder with, people when I'm having conversations about what they're currently doing, but I always wonder what got people into that office, or shall I say into that world. So I'll turn that towards you. What got you into the contracting world?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. So I was in the military. I was active duty enlisted in the Air Force, and I did medical logistics. And as part of that, I was involved with acquisitions, and I did purchasing, and I picked up some contracting officer representative responsibilities and some core duties. And the contracting office would come over, and they were always, essential to getting us what we needed. But they just seemed so important, Derek. And I was like, I want a job like that. So what a surprise that turned out to be, right? But no, so that's
Absolutely.
how I that's how I found out about contracting. Yeah, so
Mm,
I kind of fell in love with it. Got out of the
yeah,
military, went to college, and here I am.
absolutely. Well, here you are, and look, the floor is yours. We're so happy to have you, and the presentation is your time. Is your time. So go ahead, and I'll move the slides accordingly.
All right, thanks, Derek. So let's move it to slide 3, to today's agenda. So you've kind of got the background on me already, but let's discuss what we're going to talk about today. And Derek introduced some of the key takeaways that we're going to have. But this session is really going to cover the power of responding to requests for information and source of thought notices. Those are RFIs and SSNs. The differences between requests for quotes, RFQs, and requests for proposals, RFPs. We'll cover some tips to create more effective responses to each of these notices, some common mistakes to avoid. I'll give you my insight along the way, and yeah, so that'll be it. And we will have time at the end for any questions as well. So next slide, Derek. Okay, so here is our types of notices. So you have RFIs, these are your requests for information, or source of thought notices, your SFNs, as well as requests for quotes, RFQs, and requests for proposals, RFPs. These are each different types of notices that the government issues to the vendor community. So each of these is very unique in their own way, as we'll learn about more today, but they all serve the same core purpose, which is to assist the government in finding the right supplier to meet its mission needs. Let's move on to the next slide. And here we'll talk about the definitions of each of these. So first, requests for information, these are your RFIs, and your source of thought notices, SSNs. These are market research tools that are used to canvass the vendor community. So we use these to obtain pricing, delivery, capability, and other information in the planning process of the acquisition phase. RFIs are used to solicit industry input. And so when we are issuing RFIs, we're requesting information, and that could include feedback regarding the government's requirement. So we might have some very specific questions about that. We might want feedback to help us with our intended procurement strategy. And we could also solicit industry input to see, the capability of businesses, as well as the capability of small businesses. So are there enough interested and capable small businesses to help the government do a small business set aside? And source of thought notices primarily help the government determine who may be a viable source. So we're not really requesting as much information as much as we are seeing who would be a source. And although RFIs and source of thought notices, they do differ, but they're often used in very similar ways. And I'm sure some of our industry partners have probably already seen that. So for today's purposes, we're really going to group those two types of notices together. Next, RFQs and RFPs. These are both solicitation notices. So the government issues RFQs to obtain price, cost, delivery, and other information from suppliers. And RFPs are also used kind of in the same way, but really we're communicating our requirement and, well, requesting proposals, right? So that's in the name. All right, let's move on to the next slide. And here we can see where we are in the acquisition process. And I hinted to this a little bit earlier. So you can see that in the planning phase of the acquisition process, this is where the government would issue RFIs and source of thought notices. These are market research tools. In the solicitation phase, which is the next phase of the acquisition process, this is where the government is really requesting quotes or proposals. So these are our solicitation notices. And you can see here and this is kind of, Derek mentioned like part of a 101 course, the acquisition process really spans from planning, which is where we're at, all of the way into administration. So this could be issuing modifications, providing further detail or instructions to the contractors. It's where the work gets done, and it also includes closeout. But today's training, we're going to focus in the planning and solicitation phase. That's where these types of notices are issued. So next slide, Derek. Okay, so now that you know what each of these notices are and why the government uses them, let's discuss where they are. And we're speaking in terms of the FAR and the marketplace. So first, let's talk about the FAR. FAR stands for Federal Acquisition Regulation, and it is the regulatory body that governs all of federal contracting. And if you're not already familiar with the FAR, I recommend going to acquisition.gov to learn more. The FAR really provides the rules of the game, so to speak, for how procurement notices and methods are done within the federal contracting activity. All right, so let's start here with this first row where it says RFI SSN. So you should understand already, why we issue RFIs and source of thought notices. But let's look here at this third column over, and that identifies FAR Part 8.4, which is titled Required Sources of Supply. And this is where the policies and procedures for using GSA schedules is located. I'm using schedules as kind of an example here. But here you can see in this fourth column that, it identifies GSA schedules, right? So what I want you to see is that RFIs and source of thought notices are issued in accordance with the procedures that are subpart 8.4 for GSA scheduled orders. Same thing with source of thought notices. So RFIs and SSCNs can also be issued for orders under FAR Part 12, and these are commercial item purchases. FAR Parts 13 and 15, which would be open market buy, and FAR 16.505. And an example of where you might see an RFI issued for orders under FAR 16.505 would be if you're a vendor under like GSA Oasis or Alliant. These are IDIQ type contracts. And in fact, that's what FAR 16.505 is for. It's the ordering procedures for indefinite delivery contracts. So if you are a vendor on an IDIQ, you might see some RFIs and source of thought notices. If you're a vendor, again, under those IDIQs, you might also see some RFPs. And so we're going to jump below here to row number 2. You can see that RFPs are issued for commercial items under FAR Part 12, for open market items under FAR Parts 13 and 15, but also under FAR 16.505. So that's kind of an important thing to know, that if you're in that world, you will see RFIs or RFPs. But let's switch on down here to RFQs. So RFQs are seen in the FAR subpart 8.4 world, and so this includes GSA schedules, as well as FAR Part 13. So these are open market buys, but they are below the simplified acquisition threshold. And, I just want to have a disclaimer here. I'm talking about, GSA schedules or Oasis or Alliant vehicles. These are just examples, right? So you can see these in other parts of the FAR or with other contracting vehicles as well. I just want to give you an idea of where you might come across some of these notices. So if you are on SAM.gov, you might see some RFIs or source of thought notices, because that would be your open market buys, or you might also see some request for proposals, or request for quotes, depending on the dollar value. We might have questions about this later. We can save those for the end. I know there's a lot going on this slide. Derek should provide you with a copy of the slides as well. So this would be a good one to refer back to. But let's move on. So let's look at the next slide. So what to expect. And now we're gonna switch back to RFIs. So how should vendors respond to an RFI? So first of all, you should know what is in an RFI. And there is no standard format for what has to be included within an RFI. It is at the government's discretion. So the government provides an overview of its requirement, whatever requirement that is, and then it might have some questions for industry to respond to. You always want to follow the instructions in an RFI for how to respond. And typically the most important information that you're going to be asked to provide is your company's interest in the requirement. So will you submit an offer for this requirement, once that RFQ or RFP is issued? Will you be proposing as a small or a large business? Do you have the capability to perform? And what relevant experience does your organization have in relation to this requirement? You might also be asked if you anticipate using subcontractors for the effort. So if you're a large business, you might be asked what percentage of small business subcontractors are you going to use in this effort? You might also be asked if you have any conflicts of interest. So these are all kind of the typical questions that are found in an RFI that would be issued to government. All right, and let's go to the next slide, and we're going to see an example of an RFI. So here is a snapshot of an actual RFI. I actually took this snapshot from one of my RFIs. So these questions kind of follow the outline of the previous slide, and were provided for a less complex services requirement. And you can see that there's just 5 questions that the government has put out to industry. And along with these questions, the government also provided a draft requirement document that really described the services that we needed. And let's go to the next slide, and we'll take a look at what an RFI looks like for a more complex requirement. And I hope that you can see this. I know this is a little bit smaller. This is also taken from an actual RFI that I issued. And here you can see that the RFI provided vendors with some specific tasks which the government deemed critical for the contractor to perform successfully. So the government here is asking industry to review these critical tasks and provide the specific technical skills your company possesses, which ensures capability to perform the tasks as the prime contractor. So essentially what we were looking for is we wanted to have assurance that we could find a supplier who had the capability and oversight required for these tasks. Again, this is like a larger, more complex requirement that we were working on. And so what I want for you all to take away from here is that you can see these 2 RFI examples and how they vary. And really they vary based on the size and complexity of the government's requirement, because again, there is no standard format for an RFI. All right, let's go to the next slide and look at some RFI tips. Okay, so when responding to RFI, it is important to focus on the requirement. So make sure that you are responding timely, that you are complete, your response is complete based on what the government has asked for you. And the most important thing is to focus on the government's requirement and how your company can fulfill the requirement. So it's less about who your company is, and it's more about, again, how you can fulfill the government's requirement. And most important here is that, we need your responses. So I know, RFI notices or responses and source of thought notices, they do take up your time to provide responses, but your feedback really is valuable. One of the key things that I mentioned earlier is we use these responses to determine if there's a capable small business market And so, if we don't receive enough responses from small businesses, it could seem to us like there are not enough interested, capable small businesses, meaning that the requirement will not be set aside. And so small businesses would have to compete with large businesses for that work. And we don't want that either. And additionally, make sure that you are specific in your responses. So spell out acronyms. I know the government is the worst when it comes to acronyms. It is really difficult. But, the Army's acronyms might vary from the Air Force or the VA's acronyms or your own industry acronyms. So just make sure that you spell those out. Also, provide dollar values. That's helpful for us to see, okay, so you might have experience in this area, but is that experience relative in size to our requirement? So do you have kind of the right level of experience that we're looking for? You also want to provide dates that help us see if your experience is recent, and so forth. So just make sure that any additional information that you give us, you're very clear on, and that helps us get a larger, more detailed picture of who your company is and your product or service that you're offering to the government. All right, let's move to the next slide, RFPs, what to expect. So the FAR outlines the minimum requirements that should be included within an RFP. And again, RFPs are a type of solicitation. So in RFPs, the government will communicate its requirement. This is typically done by way of a performance work statement, a PWS, or a statement of work, an SOW. And we also will provide the terms and conditions, and so we call these provisions and clauses. If you have an attorney on staff, you definitely want your attorney to take a look at those. You can spend a lot of time looking at provisions and clauses. And we'll also provide within the RFP instructions for how to propose. And this could include things such as formatting, page limitations, and then the required proposal content. So we could be asking for a technical volume, which you would use to demonstrate your capability and experience as it relates to the requirement. The government will also provide the evaluation criteria. And here they will tell you the basis of award. And this is how we're going to make an award decision. So it could be that your technical volume is more important than your proposed price, or it could be that award will be made to the lowest price technically acceptable proposal. So the evaluation criteria states how cost, price, and small business utilization will be evaluated. All right, let's go to the next slide. RFQs, what to expect. So RFQs will often follow a very similar format to RFPs, but there's one major difference between RFQs and RFPs, and that is that quotes provided in response to an RFQ do not establish a binding contract agreement with the government. So the contract is only established when the contractor either accepts the government's subsequent offer to work, and this happens in either one of two ways, either by signing the quote or by performing or delivering the government's requirements. And so if you receive a response from the government to start work and you start that work, that is another way to establish that contract agreement. So it's just kind of important to know that that is one major difference between RFPs and RFQs. All right, let's move on to the next slide. RFQs and RFP tips. So these are some do's, some things that you will want to do. When responding to RFQs or RFPs, the most important thing to do is to read and reread the solicitation. So pay special attention to the instructions to offerers. This will be provided, and it will let you know, what needs to be in your proposal or in your quote. You should also receive the PWS or the statement of work and the evaluation criteria. That will also be provided to you. So just make sure that you read and reread those documents to familiarize yourself with the requirements, and also to make sure that you're accounting for everything that you're going to have to provide. There's also most often a provided question and answer period during the solicitation process. This will be sometime after the solicitation notice, so either the RFQ or the RFP is issued, and then before it closes. So there's a little window there where you can have an opportunity to ask questions. I highly, highly encourage you to ask questions. If you have any kind of uncertainty or if anything is a little vague, that is your time to ask the question. I do want to caution you to phrase your question in a manner in which it doesn't provide any proprietary or otherwise advantageous information to your competitors. Because what we do is we compile all of the questions received, we provide answers to those, and then we will issue the question and answer document to all interested offers. So again, make sure that you're not, putting in there exactly how you're going to do something or what makes your company more special. You want to make sure that you're phrasing the question in a way that doesn't provide that information to your competitors. And also, this was mentioned in the RFI tips as well, but it's worth restating. Just make sure that you're very specific in your responses. So spell acronyms, provide dollar values, and so forth. And, lastly, there's a word in here I kind of want to hit on, and that's responsive. Essentially, responsiveness is a determination of whether or not an offer has responded to the material elements of the solicitation. And so that could be, providing all of the proposal volumes on time. If you are non-responsive, your proposal might not even be evaluated. So they might determine that you were ineligible for award consideration. So again, just make sure that you pay special attention to those instructions to offers to ensure that your proposal is compliant and that you have provided all the material elements and that you do so on time. All right, next slide. Let's look at some RFQ and RFP don'ts. So much of these don'ts should be pretty familiar to you by now, but I just want to highlight a couple, and those are don't low bid and don't restate the requirement. So let's look first at low bidding. Everyone wants to provide a competitive price and to get an award. That totally makes sense, right? But let's look at this a different way. So an unrealistically low price could signal that you don't have an adequate understanding of the requirement, and that could have a negative impact on your technical evaluation, and ultimately, it could harm your chances for an award. So a very simple example I like to give, let's say that you need to have the roof of your house replaced, and your contractor provides you a quote for $500 to replace your roof. So you would assume that he does not understand the full scope of the job. There's no way he can replace your entire roof for only $500. So if you think he doesn't understand the full scope of the job, that could mean that there's also a high risk that he will not successfully replace your roof. And so, you likely wouldn't hire that contractor to do the job. So it's a very simple example, but I hope it illustrates the point. The last big tip here is to not restate the requirement. And so, the government understands what its requirement is. Another kind of simple example here is that if we have a requirement for lawn services, you don't want to just say that, hey, my company provides lawn services. What we really want to hear as a government is how you provide that lawn service. So perhaps you have a very experienced staff. They make few mistakes, and so that increases quality and it reduces rework, saving money. Or perhaps your equipment is very efficient, and so your maintenance and operation costs are lower. So these are all pieces of information that make a bigger impact in your response notice. And if you simply restate the requirement stating that you provide lawn services, the government really is unable to determine how your proposal is superior to your competition, right? So we don't really know what advantages you would have over someone else and those specific benefits that your company could provide to us that someone else could not. So we can go to the next slide. That's really all I have for content. Again, we kind of went over a lot today, but I am open for questions if there are any questions on the line.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Jessica, yeah, I'm sorry, that's my mute. Yeah, we do have a couple questions here. So, one is, after an RFI / SSN is submitted, and if a supplier is identified as a potential vendor, what are the next steps?
Okay. And so that's a very good question. And so, let me just kind of restate that. So the government issues an RFI or an SSN, and we see here that we have some capable vendors. What we're really looking for is a list of vendors, right? And so we're not looking at your responses and saying, oh, vendor A is who we want on contract. The government always wants competition. So we want vendors A, B, C, and D. So what we do is we use that information to target those vendors whenever we go to issue out our RFP or our RFQ. We want to make sure that they know that solicitation is coming out. Perhaps when it's going to come out, if we have a draft notice that we can give them, we'll do that as well to help them be prepared to compete. We would also look at those vendors to see what their size category is. So are there enough small businesses? Maybe there are plenty of women-owned small businesses, and we'll determine that, we can do a woman-owned small business set-aside. So that's kind of the major activities that happen on the government end once we receive those notices and identify capable vendors.
Jessica, I want to quickly sort of go back to the SSN slide, and I can't. Do you remember what number slide that is? I wanted to ask the question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Slide 8, probably 8.
Slide, let's see, 8.
That's where it began.
Okay, wait, slide 8, let's see here. What to expect?
Yep.
Okay, now what's typically in the SSN?
Yeah, so and again, it kind of depends on who the agency is issuing it and what they're looking for.
Okay.
So SSNs are really kind of used to identify a source, and I will say that sometimes we're not looking for as much feedback. So perhaps we have a lot of things figured out. We just want to know who our sources are. And so it could be that we're asking the vendor community for their capability in performing, for their experience, and then also for maybe their size standards with their NAICS code. And so it's less asking for feedback, and it's more just canvassing the vendor community to see who's out there. And sometimes, sometimes RFIs and sources thought notices are used pretty much the same way, which is why I kind of lump them together. And RFI will generally ask for more detailed, open-ended questions. So, can the government meet this requirement using commercial items? Or, what industry best practices could you bring to this requirement, and so forth. But a lot of times they're used in the similar vein. Yeah.
Okay. And so what can small businesses do? Because, you brought up such a great point about if these RFIs or source of salt notices aren't answered and responded to properly, that they could go away and then are sent out to larger firms. So, I guess in the immediacy of it, what are some of the things that small businesses can do? Because we don't want to see those projects go away and get into the hands of large firms. So from your experience, what have you seen that causes those projects to go into the hands of large firms, and what can small business owners do to combat that? or prevent
That
it?
is a great question. So number one would be to just respond to the RFI or SSN. So respond and let us know that you're out there, that you're capable, and that you're
Mm,
interested in performing the requirement. If you are not yet capable, one thing that you can do is to, and I say capable as in you don't have all of the skills or technical capabilities in-house to perform the requirement on your own. And that's fine. That's how you grow as a business, right? Some things that you could do in that area would be to team. So you could partner with other small businesses to provide a total solution to the government. You could also work with some larger businesses to get some experience so that when you are competing on your own, you can say that you have that relevant experience. But yeah, the most important thing to do is to just respond to those notices. Because if we don't receive small business responses, then it could look like, either small businesses aren't interested in the requirement or that they just don't have the capability, and that could not be the case. There are some instances where we've had requirements that have been set aside for large businesses, and largest have performed that work. But now, for whatever reason, small businesses have more experience. And so
mm-hmm.
now small businesses can compete. So just because something has not been set aside in the past doesn't mean that it won't be set aside in the future. So keep that in mind too. Don't be discouraged from responding.
If I missed this question, or if I missed this answer, in your last answer, please forgive me. But I want to go back to where you said the small business firms could join together.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a matter of the contracting officer? Would the contracting officer say to a small business firm or small business firms that are replying to RFIs or SSNs, hey, from your reply, you can do this, you can do that. Why don't you two work together? Why don't you 3 or 4 work together? Is that viable? Is that something that happens?
That's a great question. I have not seen that from my experience, but I have never worked directly in a small business office. So I've always kind of just been on the requirement side of it. So I'm not sure if they do that or not. But what I can say is that, and I'm going to use, I work with GSA, so that's where a lot of my experience comes from. So I'm going to use the GSA example.
Mm-hmm.
So under the GSA schedule program, GSA has something that's called contractor teaming arrangements. And CTAs, as we call them, contractor teaming arrangements, are different from joint ventures in that it's not like a separate legal entity, but instead it's just a group of small businesses that have signed an agreement, and they each have their own schedules contract, and they compete on requirements. And so some of that is just you being familiar with your industry and who your competitors are, or how
Mm-hmm.
you can leverage some skills to really compete for some of those requirements, and again, provide a total solution. And so it could be that, there's a requirement that requires some graphic design elements as well as some
Mm-hmm.
cloud computing elements. So let's say you do graphic design. You could go and look and see, what small businesses are out there that do cloud computing. And so you could come to them and say, hey, we do different things, but I think that we could complement each other well, and work together for some of these larger requirements that require, cloud computing and graphic design. So it's just making sure that as a small business, you also know the small business vendor community.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have another question here, Jessica, and we're talking to Jessica Pate with GSA. The question is there another, is SAM.gov the only place where opportunities are posted?
That's a great question. Okay, so it is not. So at SAM.gov, and forgive me if I say SEO, it used to be called SEO, and I'm still in that habit of saying SEO. So government agencies have public-facing websites that also list their requirements and upcoming procurements. And so I mentioned the FAR earlier, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, and that is posted at acquisition.gov. I would recommend that each of you small businesses go to the website for acquisition.gov, and there will be a spot on there that says procurement forecast. And there is a procurement forecasting tool. There's also, each agency has a public-facing website that lists its upcoming procurement.
Okay.
So you can get on there and see what is coming down the line and kind of get prepared as far as, what you might want to bid on, what small business partners you might want to team with.
Right.
So that's a great place to look. If you are on another tool or another contracting vehicle such as a GSA schedule, if you're a GSA schedule holder, those might be emailed to you or could be posted to online to where your proposals are received at within the eBuy system. And so it kind of depends on where you're at. And so and when I say where you're at, I mean which marketplace that you're performing in. But definitely I would go to SAM.gov, familiarize yourself with those requirements, the types that are posted, which agencies are posting them. You can also go ahead and get an idea you can just look for sort by RFI. That way you can see, what is the government looking for? What do these notices normally look like? And so what would I normally have to respond so that when you do respond, you're already more familiar and prepared. But yeah, I would definitely familiarize yourself with the agency websites as well.
Can a startup company get a GSA schedule without past performance? If so, what are the steps?
So GSA does have specific requirements for getting on the schedules program. And yes, that does require some years of experience. I won't go into too much detail about what's required, but I will say that GSA offers monthly training on that. And we have a website that's open, and you can get on a GSA schedule at any time. So it's open enrollment. There's not like a special period to submit an offer to propose. But I would recommend, if you're interested in getting on a schedule, perhaps go ahead and look at what other contractors are on schedule in the area. The special item number is what we call them, that you would be competing in. Perhaps there's someone that you could go ahead and partner with to go ahead and get some experience. And you don't have to have, really what we're looking for is federal experience. And so you could get that by any way, but I do think, kind of partnering with other established contractors would be a good way. There's also the Mentor Protege program, which SBA manages, which you could learn a little bit more too. That would also help, get you some experience before you're out there on your own.
Absolutely. And this will be the final question, unless we have some more from our listeners. But I just wanted to kind of hit on just really, just down to earth, practical point here to really get people or keep people encouraged. So for the uninitiated, Jessica, this can be sort of daunting, right? RFIs, RFPs, the schedules and things like that, and asking questions of the contracting officer. I can't blame a person if they start feeling like, oh, I don't want to bother these people. I don't want to get on somebody's bad side. These things, because I've heard them before, right? I've heard that before. But also generally, I've also heard and spoken with contracting officers that they say, hey, there's no such thing as over communicating.
Yeah.
When it comes to the bidding contract. So, please go ahead.
Yeah, I am on team. There's no such thing as over communicating. And I'll just, one thing to know too, if you're a small business, please don't be afraid of working with us. We only succeed by having contractors. right? So we're looking for you. We need your help with these requirements. And so you are a strategic partner in our business. So please just keep that in mind. One thing I didn't mention this before, but as you're familiarizing yourself with the work that you want to do, the agencies that you want to partner with, you can always reach out to that program management office. So the specific office that has the requirement. And so contracting works for them, right? So those are our customers. They have a requirement. We help them get it on contract. But perhaps there's a specific office. Let's just say it's the Office of Clean Energy and the Department of Energy. You can get to know that office. You can call that office. You can, email them. You can send them literature. But you can go ahead and ask them, tell me about some of your requirements. Like, I read this on your website. It says you have these upcoming requirements. What can you tell me more about? So sometimes our customer offices, in partnership with contracting, will have industry days where we will talk about the requirements that are coming up. And we do that to industry. You can talk to the customer agency up until the point the solicitation is issued. Once that RFP or RFQ notice is issued, you should only be talking to the contracting office. But prior to that, absolutely talk to that customer agency, because that's who you'll be working hand in hand with to actually get this requirement, whatever it is, completed. And I've also been one to have a second or even third round of question and answers. So I mentioned that, we might have a question and answer period after the first round of the solicitation. And then we realized, based on some feedback, that, maybe someone else outside of that period came up to us and said, hey, we have extra questions. If there's more than one person that's asking that question, we might decide to do another round and we could put out some more information. Or if we make a change based on that first round of questions, maybe that first round of questions said, hey, government, you're really vague in this area. So we expanded upon our statement of work or performance work statement to provide some more information. We might do another round to make sure that, hey, we've made some changes based on your feedback, but if you have any more questions about this, let us know. We will also do drafts. So I have issued several drafts for one large requirement before, because, we're building our requirement based on feedback from industry, as well as feedback from our customers, from our customer offices as well. But we want to make sure that, hey, we need to get this on contract soon. So we're going to show you the solicitation as it evolves, right? So first, maybe we only have this graphic design element, but now we've added cloud computing. So we want to make sure that you're ready and aware of that, so that once the final solicitation is issued, it'll cut down on that question and answer period some, and then also, we can proceed proposals faster. We don't have to have quite a long open solicitation window, things like that. Absolutely. But no, absolutely be open.
And I think that we can't underestimate how important research is, and how much research is in the orbit of these contracts. It's so important to it, whether the research that Jessica was just describing, or the research in general in what you're able to do, what your market looks like. It is so important. I just got a message from Dr. LaTanya Lewis, who's also listening today to today's program. Dr. Lewis, who has been a guest here on our webinars, is the Business Development Manager with the Mississippi Development Authority, Business Development Manager for Minority and Small Business Development Division with MDA. And her statement, when we were talking about the bidding process, her message to me is, our Apex Accelerator program allows the clients to sign up for electronic bid notifications. So that's another tool, right, that people can use, that the small business firms can use to sign up for electronic bid notifications. I believe that is all of the questions. Jessica, we're going to let you out of here. Thank you so much. You have been great. Where can people learn more about what GSA is doing, your office is doing, and any last words that you want to share before we conclude today?
Yeah, Derek, thank you so much. It's been an honor to speak with you guys and to answer questions. I would recommend going to gsa.gov to learn more. We have an extensive website. So if you're interested in the schedule program, you can go to gsa.gov/schedule. We also have the Oasis contract vehicle. So take some time, explore around our website. Again, that's gsa.gov. If you have any specific questions as it regards to the schedule program, you can email the Multiple Award Schedule Program Management Office, and that's at maspmo@gsa.gov. So that's it.
And I just put the web address gsa.gov, www.gsa.gov in the Q&A portion. Jessica, thank you again. We really appreciate you, and we'll be in contact.
All right, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jessica, thank you so much. That was Jessica Pate, our guest for today. This was good. This was good. This was a lot of great information. And I hope again that all of you avail yourselves of it. I know it can be overwhelming at times, but thankfully we have people like Jessica that are willing, experts like Jessica, that are willing to join us to talk about this information from their expert perspective. Again, we are having our Grow to Empower workshop. If you want to attend in person, if you are looking to just attend via the web link, let me know. I will send you the flyer. Make sure that you have everything to register. Just send me an email at Derek, DEREK, .eady@sba.gov, and we want to see you registered. We want you to attend. We want to present you with this information, this business development information, certainly around the world of government contracting, so that your business can shoot upward. That's what we're looking for. So again, for my guest today, Jessica Pate, I am Derek Eady, Economic Development Specialist with the U.S. Small Business Administration. Thank you all for joining the conversation. Take care. Be safe.